we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, make sure you hit subscribe down below if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening, wherever you're listening, just give us a rating, 5 stars, please, if you like it, and share with your friends, let everyone know. And if you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. And we got a couple tiers there. However you want to support the podcast, it's up to you. We'll have some extra stuff there. But, we're always going to bring you all the good stuff here. So whether you're listening or whether you're watching, hit that like button and tell your friends. But today I'd like to welcome back to the show my great buddy, Zach Angus. How are you, brother?
Good, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I got my Duke shirt on for you.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Look at that, 2010 champs. Remember that?
I think we won 4 games this year, but
when life was good. But I'll just blame COVID for everything this year.
Yeah.
Weird, crazy thing. Like what, I mean, I think I saw a statistic. This was like the second time Duke hasn't been in the tournament, like for whatever reason. I don't think they've ever not made it because they sucked, but I think this is like one of the only other times that they just obviously COVID, but Kentucky too, right?
Yeah, I think the one I saw was like it's the first time ever that like Kentucky, Kansas, UNC, Duke have not been ranked in the top 30 or whatever it is.
Insane.
But it's I haven't been following them enough this year.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me. They have like all these top prospects coming in every year.
Right.
But yeah. Couldn't figure it out, couldn't put it together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. It's a little bit of the because I mean, at least for Western football, we were, at least when I was getting recruited, we were always considered one of the top schools. Obviously, they've won a Vanier within the past years. They've won a lot of OUA championships, like the Yates Cup. They've won a lot of those like within the past few decades. So, and the way Greg Marshall kind of runs the program, it's probably the closest thing to like a professional program in Canada, right next to Laval. And then like a couple other schools now obviously catching up because it's been a few years since I've been in school, but at least at that time, like we were considered the best to the point where a lot of kids just didn't even want to come to Western at all because they're like, there's no chance I'm going to play. Like they get the best of the best of the best. And like, if anything, they over recruit. And like kids are excited to go there because they're like, holy shit, I'm being recruited by Western.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's 130 kids at camp and like the first training camp of the year. And then we got to whittle that down to about like 105. And you can only bring on road trips, you can only bring 55 players. You can't bring your whole roster. So again, like you're really whittling things down. And a lot of kids knew that, like some of the more knowledgeable kids understood that and then just went to other programs because they knew that they'd have a better shot. And it's an interesting thing because I'm sure that happens with every program. Like, obviously with basketball, I'm sure it was Carleton, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
Would just be like, no chance. I'm not even going to look at Carleton.
Yeah. So I remember when I was in high school, Carleton, man, I don't even know if I could say they recruited me, but he came up to me after a game and said, hey, we should try to
Coach Smart.
Yeah, Coach Smart. This is way back when. Came up to me after a game, said, hey, we should sit down, me, you, your parents, get dinner. Just kind of like the classic moves, to get dinner and they pay for it.
100%.
Try to smooch you. And then he was like, yeah, we should do this, get together, talk about, the possibility of coming to Carleton, yada, yada. Never heard from him again. Like he just came up to me after this game, said that, never talked to him once after that.
Oh no.
I'm sure I could have like maybe pursued it a bit more,
right?
But I was never really that interested in going to Carleton. But it goes back to kind of what you're saying, like do you want to be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond? Do you want to, be a role player on a championship team or starter or star player on, that like end of the line,
Mhm.
barely making playoffs.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's interesting. I will say this. It's interesting about O linemen, like at least for myself as a tackle, technically I have two spots that I could go for. I could go for right or I could go for left tackle. Technically, I could essentially go for any position on the offensive line. Like
Mm,
it's funny with football for that. Cause then obviously other positions, wide receiver, there's several, but quarterback, there's only one, right? Like that's going to be playing. So that I feel is a lot closer to what basketball would kind of feel like. Cause really,
mm,
depending on your style of play, like if I was trying for basketball, there's only one starting center position for sure.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's funny how it almost like narrows that field of like your even your chances, right? So you kind of look at that, and then I remember knowing that like the left tackle at Western, he had 1 year left, and the right tackle had 2 years left. So like you start to like figure this stuff out, right? Like
Yeah.
as and they're telling you that as you're recruiting. It's not like they're hiding this knowledge, but sometimes you're going to a school knowing that you're at least the first year you're just going to sit out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And really a freshman starting is relatively rare. I think in a lot of sports, right? Like I mean, maybe you might see that more in basketball just
Mm-hmm. I
because
think so.
there's less guys on the team.
Yeah.
And like if there's turnover and all of a sudden you lose 3 out of 5 starters or something because they just graduated, you got to
Yeah.
give guys a chance. But like we only maybe had a couple guys that were like freshmen. And again, football too, like there's so much strength that like if you're coming straight out of high school, like you're just not.
Yeah.
Nowadays is different. Like, we talked even last time, like how different athletes are like nowadays coming out. Like, cause we were working out and stuff, but we weren't like going
No,
crazy. Like we knew we had
not
to work
crazy.
out.
Like not on the weights and stuff. Yeah.
No, but like now, like if I was talking to a high school kid and they were thinking to go to the next level, like they had better been training since grade 9 at least, like been training.
Yeah. It's wild, man. I see videos of like, grade sevens in the weight room doing like lifting weights. And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that's
Well, it
insane.
used
I
to be,
don't,
I think even when we were kids, the knowledge was you can be like you don't want to start lifting too young. And that's
mm-hmm.
still relatively
Starting
true,
to
but
grow.
that doesn't mean you shouldn't start training.
Mm-hmm.
Like essentially you can start getting kids to do bench press and push-ups and squats and stuff with just a bar, like a wooden stick, like not even any weight.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're getting them to start moving in that way, you're already giving them an advantage once they actually hit the weights, right?
Yeah. I was just gonna say that. I think like movement is super important. So like if you are grade 6, 7, 8, don't give them any weights. Make
Right.
sure that they're moving through the space appropriately. Like they're moving
Totally.
through a squat how they should. They're
Mhm.
engaging their glutes when they're dipping down. They're
Yep.
not hunching their back. They're not leaning forward.
Right.
And then when they get to whenever they want to start, they want to start in grade 11 or they
Mhm.
want to start in grade 9. They're going to be in a way better position
For sure.
because those muscles are already activated.
Right.
The amount when I think back, like what I know now about um, physical fitness or working out or anything
Mhm.
versus like grade 9 where I
Right.
literally knew nothing. Um, yeah, like I wish I would have just moved properly more.
Sure. Sure.
So the amount
Well,
of compensation I did, like putting
right.
all this pressure on my back because I didn't want to engage my hamstrings because they were so tight. My calves didn't stretch ever, like all these things.
Right.
Um,
And then all
yeah.
of a sudden you get to university and you have a strength and conditioning coach
Mm-hmm.
who like potentially depending on your scenario you might have never had like a proper trainer coach. And especially I mean for you especially, we had Jeff Watson at
I know.
Western,
I was just
right?
thinking
And
that.
he's super intense, right? So
Sweet.
again, even on my end too, right? Like just the what I learned like when I was a personal trainer, everything I knew as being a personal trainer was from just how Jeff Watson trained me. Like
Yeah.
I just thought like, and I wasn't particularly like my demeanor wasn't intense, but the style of training, what to do, how to train,
Mm-hmm.
all that knowledge, definitely all the mechanics of how to do the lifts, like that's
Mm-hmm.
all from him. And up until that point, like from high school to university, like I didn't have a person like that in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I went back actually, I had Travis on the podcast. I went back between first and second year and found Travis, but that was through another one of my teammates. Shout out Jared McCrory. That was through one of my teammates who introduced me to him, and he was just as good. Like, but you have to search, and it's expensive and it's exclusive to find some of these guys that know what they're doing.
For
But
sure.
again, how many kids throughout history have just showed up to university and just been like either not ready or underprepared or just not prepared in the right way, and all of a sudden like that's their killer, right? Like,
Yeah,
again, I
dude.
don't think you see that so much anymore, but probably back in the day.
Well, there's so much more knowledge and everything now, and it's so much more easily accessible. But going back to Watson, like I had the worst first year ever. I was at Western for first year,
Right.
and I literally never stretched for 19 years.
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
and I'm using all these muscles,
Right.
running and playing basketball, and
Right.
I was starting to lift a little bit,
Right.
and they're all just tightening up every time I use them, and I'm never stretching them. And he introduced me to the roller, and
Woo!
I think I was rolling my quads or my T-band.
Right.
Oh my! I've never felt anything that painful my entire life. Like
Especially the first time after 19 years
it
of
was
zero.
it was crazy. I was like, this little like piece of foam is going to help me. No, this is going to do nothing. Get on it. If I didn't shed a tear, I'd be surprised. Like,
I
holy.
still have that sadistic piece of equipment, man. I still use it all the time.
Yeah, but now I do it and I'm like, I can't even really feel it,
Right.
because you
You're
take care
used
of
to
it, you do it
you're
often.
used to it, you're taking care of it. There's a lot of like pain tolerance, definitely, because like, and like I know, like I don't even use it on my glutes anymore. It doesn't do it. I use the lacrosse ball.
Yeah,
Like, but that's like you're kind of, you have to level up to that kind of thing, right? We actually used to have a shot put at Western. I don't know if you remember that, but we had like a round shot put ball, and that was
okay.
excellent for rolling out the glutes because it didn't like, I find the crossball like will roll away, but the shot put's like 60, like is a pound, so it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
Good old shot put, 16 ounces, baby.
I just think back of that first year, like I bet you my vertical was like 4 inches because my legs were gone every day,
Oh no. Yeah.
practicing every day, like
Yeah, right.
more
So do you
intense.
guys do like a 2-a-day schedule kind of thing? Like in like, because obviously you're like training, like when you're
Oh
first
yeah.
getting together, it's during the year, school year, obviously, right? So like what, at least with Western we had, or at least with football, we had the advantage of not having school for like 2 weeks, right? Because training camp would start like August 19th. So then we'd have like no school. So 2-a-days were like mandatory. It was football, nothing but football. What was it like the first couple of weeks of basketball?
It was certainly like more intense. I can't really remember Western. I know at Guelph
Sure.
we had like one or two
Okay.
actual training camps.
Right.
But it was a week, and it was 2 days. But you had so much free time because it was like Frosh week. You had all this free time. One of them was more just like cardio and everything, and then the other one was like straight defense. Like everything at the beginning
Right.
just sucks.
Okay.
Like you're not like working on play. You're not doing any too much offensively or
Sure.
doing too much scrimmaging. You're just like, all right, this is the defense we're going to play, and
Right.
we're going to work on it all week, and you're going to do a bunch of terrible drills that make you hate your life, because we want to get you prepared,
And they're
because some of you,
testing guys too, I guess, right?
yeah, like testing their mental toughness. And you're also just seeing like, oh, this guy went home for the summer and did nothing except for eat Cheetos, and now we got to whip him back into shape. So
Brutal. That was like,
it's like disrespectful.
yeah, man. There was a couple guys on the team I can remember that just didn't do shit in the summer, and you'd be like, man, I worked my friggin' ass off. Like I would stay after first year, like I said, I went home, but then afterward I stayed in the summer because that was the best time. You basically got, number one, you got like free training because it was through our strength and conditioning coach, but it was excellent. The guys who stuck around, and it was like a lot of guys stuck around. Majority of the starting offense and defense did stick around, whether they were from London or not. And it was solely to work out. But there was one guy, and he was still, I think up until our last year, where he kind of fell off the map. just because they were better athletes, he still was starting one of our wide receivers who was still that good and like
Yeah.
crazy fast still
Yeah.
without, and he never worked out.
Yeah. And you
He
get
just
that,
didn't
like,
work out.
but they're like few and far between. And certainly
Oh yeah.
I wasn't that, so I
Right.
couldn't do that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
like the summer is when you got the most growth. The summers, like, you don't grow really during the year. Maybe
Right.
preseason you can work on some things, but
Sure.
you get
Sure.
all that feedback from the year, like, oh man, this is what I suck at, or this is, you know,
You have all that game film to
kept
watch.
going. Yeah, they kept going under on my ball screen, so I got to work on shooting behind the screen. And
Nice.
then you work on that all summer, and then hopefully you have it in the bag for the next year, and then they change it up, and then you got to
Right.
learn, and then the next summer you grow and you get stronger, faster, and hone your skills, at least for basketball. So yeah,
Sure.
the summer was huge, man.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? Like is again, it just comes back to, I don't think you see that as often as much, but again, I think throughout the years you have guys that are just naturally gifted and can just kind of show up and not have to train really hard, and then you have the complete opposite guys. And it's the same like after when you stop playing too, right? Guys kind of go one way or the other as far as their like fitness is concerned and stuff too, right? But
100%, yeah.
right.
Like, yeah, a lot of guys I knew just got a barrel on them like
Oh
a
man,
year after they finished. They were just like,
dude.
they went from being the man, all-star, six-pack, jacked, to just being like, what happened to you? Like,
Oh
you
no.
aged 10 years in like 6 months. Like,
I
but
can't tell you actually, the more like I've seen so many like big guys, I'm talking like 6'4" plus, that I
mhm.
was like, hey, like you must have played football somewhere. And they're like, no, I played basketball at wherever. I'm like, really? Like you just again, right? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know. And maybe there's a bit of a stereotype as far as like a really skinny basketball player, but still it's like, even if you were like a big, strong center, like
yeah,
to get like to the point where I was like, oh yeah, you must have been an O lineman somewhere. I mean, that's the other weird thing is that O linemen are like now huge. Before, historically, O linemen have never been like, you mistake them for a basketball player.
hmm,
They were just like a kind of another big guy. Like, for instance, one of my, like when I was still playing, my head coach Greg Marshall, he used to play for Western. Like, I think back, it would have been back in the 70s, I think, or early 80s. He was playing for Western, and one day when we were practicing, one of the guys that he played with came just to visit the practice and just like chat with the team. Not even like a big deal, but it was just like, hey, how's everything going? Just coming back to visit. And he was just, and my coach is probably like 5'10" maybe. He's not like super tall. And the guy who came back was like about his height, even like maybe like an inch shorter. And he was talking about it, and he was like, yeah, I used to block for my coach. He's like, I used to block for Greg. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy he was an offensive tackle. And he was
yeah.
like 5'8", 5'9", like just average
Oh my
height.
God.
But that was just, again, because you didn't have like giant people really back in the day. And if you were like 6'7" in like the 70s, for sure you were playing basketball if you're going to be playing sports, right?
Yeah,
Like, at least in Canada. But
yeah,
that even reminds me, like, we're talking about kids getting prepared and either being underprepared or overprepared. It's like in the States, if you're a tall kid, they don't treat you like a center like right away, right? Like if you're like, so for me, I was 6'4" in grade 8. If
mhm,
they got a hold of me, they would have treated me like a guard as I grew up. Because if I stopped growing at a certain point,
mhm.
then at least I have the skills of a guard and I'm whatever height. But because in Canada, there's not as many people around, just like my coach and his teammate. Um, if you have a tall kid, you have to kind of use him as a center. It just makes sense.
Yeah,
Like I'd be
I
like the only kid on the team that was like clearly
yeah,
the center, right? Like,
yeah,
so they're like, all right, Mark's the center, which is fine. But if
yeah,
like I stopped growing at 6'7", which is like DeMar DeRozan's height, it's
yeah,
like kind of like like a guard height, right?
yeah.
So,
You're guarding Kobe. Yeah.
right, versus if I if I grew up in the States and then all of a sudden miraculously I grew to 6'10", then they just
Yeah,
have to teach me some post moves.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like exactly like, oh, Canada does it this way, states do it this way, but I think it
That's
just
fair.
depends on like where you're like kind of growing up. Like if you grow up in and the coach just is gonna do it that way, and he's
Yeah.
maybe a little lazier or less informed, he
Yeah.
might just say like, you're tall, go here. Or they might say like, your parents are tall, you're already tall, like
Right.
get these big man fundamental skills down because you're going to be a big
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the most important. Like any camp that I ever went to, you have like stations, and you go like, this is the dribbling station, this
Sure.
is the shooting station. Like you're learning all the skills. I go to the post station. That was like my favorite station. I was like,
Yeah.
double drop step, like up
Nice.
and unders. Like
For sure.
I love this, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I never got the
And
height.
I don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily hold it against the coaches and
Yeah.
stuff and everyone. It's more so um I just think that we just don't have as many people. Where in the States, they literally have at least 10 times the selection, depending on where they are. And it just makes sense. Like you don't need to stick this kid here because like and it's funny because as soon as you said it's not like blanket across the board, I thought of a few guys. Like I thought of Pat. Do you remember Patrick Donnelly? He's from
Yes.
Oakville. I think he played for
Yes.
Laurier for a second. He had an older brother. He was like kind of that guy where he was a
Range.
big body, and he was like
Mhm.
him and I actually went to Thailand together. So in grade
Oh yeah,
nine,
yeah.
for that
I thought you meant to like party. All
for
right, go,
basketball.
go, go. Yeah, yeah.
But
Do
in
some
grade
mushrooms.
nine, we were both like 6'6" and like not skinny fucking guys. Like we were just big bodies. But he was like he could shoot. Like he had a nice shot, and he
Hmm.
used to play for Bounce, and he'd play for he'd play for all those teams where
Yeah.
they'd give him a chance to shoot from the outside. Where whether it was St. Mary's or somewhere else, I literally had a red light. Like not this probably because I couldn't shoot, but if someone said, "Mark, you have the opportunity to shoot," I probably would have fucking practiced
Yeah.
instead of literally saying, "Don't even shoot past the elbow or I'll kill you." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "All right, I'm not going to practice."
Yeah. And our coach for grade 9 and 10, or for like junior, Patty Papele, great guy,
Brilliant.
helpful coach, but he's not like an X's and O guy at all.
Oh
Like
God,
he's
no.
not like, he's literally just gonna break you and you quit, or he's going to
Right.
instill a work ethic or a toughness that you will
Oh,
carry with you forever, which is
yes.
invaluable.
So
But
true.
he's not going to be, okay, Mark, we need to get you these guard skills. You need to work on your dribble. Like he's not that kind of coach.
No,
He's
no.
just, he
And
wasn't
I
about it.
think if anything, number one, this whole idea is like young, like grade 5 and under kind of thing. Like when you're
Mm-hmm.
young, like because I was 5'9" when I was 9, so I was tall when I was like a kid. So like again, like if you have that, if I'm a coach and when I get the opportunity to coach and I see that, for
Mm-hmm.
sure I'm going to try and at least expand the kid's mind a little bit as far as like what other possibilities are. And hey, if you stop growing at a certain point, you have this in the bag. But yeah, that whole thing with Patty, like I understand going back to it. Like I kind of understand the fact that as a high school coach, like you can only do so much as far as molding your coaching style to the players, just because you
Mm-hmm.
see so much turnover, right?
Yeah.
Especially high school junior, let alone high school senior, right? Like max, you're gonna get these guys for 2 years, right? So
Yeah.
as Patty, like you're probably not thinking, okay, what's the perfect program that I can do that no matter what player's going to come in, they're going to match. Like, no, it's just, I'm going to try and jam these square pegs into round holes as much as I can. And if they break, then they break, then they
Yeah.
quit, whatever. Right. Like, and you and I both have seen guys quit that potentially would have had a decent basketball career, but just got scared.
Maybe. Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least Tyler, I can think of one guy, Tyler, we won't mention his whole name, but
Yeah.
like that, I played with him a lot closer than you ever did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was disappointing.
Yeah.
Really good, like not like amazing player, but like would have been a decent high school player.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
didn't
It
even get a chance
really,
to play senior.
and it just showed our coach's like value system, right? Because remember when he talked about Bren, and was it
Right.
Bren or Brad, one of those, and he was like, "Oh, he's so good." Like he wasn't though. Like, but he worked hard and he was tough.
Sure.
But he, if you look at the game and you look, okay, statistically, who's producing more, who's affecting the game more, I can't put him in. But he loved him because he was tough and worked hard and
Yeah.
would never quit. Like those are valuable skills. But again, at the end of the day, like, are you producing?
Which is a Patty thing where he'll take if you can run through a wall, He'll
Yeah.
take that over skill every day.
And I get it.
If
Like
you will literally lay down and die for the team, he'll take that over everybody,
yeah,
right?
because that is valuable. But
Yeah.
you can't say that the guy who can actually shoot and, you know, has the length
Right.
defensively, but is kind of like maybe mentally a bit weaker,
Right.
needs to quit. Like
Sure.
it's tough. I think back and I think about any halftime meeting or after the game meeting. I don't ever remember once him saying like, "Oh, you know what? We didn't break the press by getting the ball in the middle, or we had to get the ball in the middle against the zone.
Right.
Like we shot like 20%. Like there's no way we're winning games that way." Like he never said that. He just always said, "You're soft,
You got
toughen
outplayed.
up." Yeah,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
swear words.
Right.
Like my
Right. So
grandma
true.
could have like done better than that. Like all
Yeah.
that stuff. That's all
It's
it
so
ever
true.
was.
It's so true. And it's funny. It's funny because you said, like quote unquote weaker mentally, but that you don't, it's not even that weak. Like you don't even have to, you can just be like, have like a mild fortitude and still crumble under some of those circumstances, right? We're freaking high school kids, and some
Exactly.
like the way that we were like, again, it was just like you said, nothing to do with really the X's and O's of the game. It was just like whether you worked hard enough, whether you should be proud. Like, right, he'd always be like, I would have been sick if my parents were in the stands, like all that stuff. And you're like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
God, man. Like, yeah, I kind of feel like that right now. Cause again, you're just a freaking high school kid. But
yeah.
that's like, but that's funny, that Patty mentality, right? Cause there's that, we talked about like that kind of Patty, like coaching tree, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
Patty Papilli, and then there's like Joe Razzo, and then like all the people that Joe coached, like Jamie,
Yeah,
and the guy
Jamie,
from
Nate
Churchill,
Listed, yeah,
and right, Nate, and like then you get all those guys too, and then
yeah,
your Mannies and your Jeffs too are kind of like that Razzo shoot off, and then obviously had dealt with Patty too, right? So
yeah.
they were kind of got all the different worlds there, right? Where
Mhm.
with Jamie, it was almost like third generation Patty, because he had been coached by Joe, right? Not only at Mary's, but then I guess a little bit at Mac too.
Yeah,
And then we got Jamie, right? But
yeah,
again, like that whole mentality of if you're mentally strong, you're a superior player, whether or not your skill is there or not. Like that Thailand team. I
mhm,
remember one kid specifically made it just because he was tough.
yeah,
And if anything, I think that Joe overlooked another guy that probably would have been a little bit more of a better asset, like
mhm,
offensively, defensive, like just again, just a better basketball asset, but didn't really try as hard as he should have in the tryout, because I think he kind of thought he was going to make it.
mhm.
But then the kid that did made it was running friggin' through the wall, almost like literally,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
through the end line, right? So
yeah. You get that
but
like
that's
a
that
fair
thing.
bit in high school. You get that quite a bit where you get like a football player that's strong and works hard and
Right.
just or like a running back, something like that, and he plays basketball and he
Yeah.
does well,
Yeah.
but like he could never play, or not, I shouldn't say never, but he probably can't play at university.
Mm-hmm.
But he does well in high school because he works harder. He's
And is
physically stronger.
strong. Right,
Yeah,
exactly. Well, because
he can
that,
do
like, I
a right
remember,
hand layup and he can
right.
bully. Yeah,
Remember when I blew my knee out in Boca? Speaking of Boca, remember I hurt my knee that one game, and it was the team we were playing. They didn't really have a center. Like they had like one tall guy, but he was like a string bean. But when I was on the court, they had like for sure he was like the fullback from the football team, that
yeah,
he was also playing basketball at that point, right? Like for sure. I was
yeah.
telling Christian about this the other day, like, and he was just so strong that I'm sure any other center he went up against, he could just out strength them and just box them out and like, do that kind of thing. But I was equally big and strong, and he like washed me out basically on a box out, like, and I'm jumping up in the air, and he just like kept like he like washed my legs out from under me kind of thing, and then I
Mhm.
landed on one leg and like hyperextended my knee.
Yeah.
But that's what you
Gross.
can get in football, right? Or sorry, in basketball, is like in high school you have these guys that aren't particularly tall, but they're just
Mhm.
like strong,
Yeah.
right? Like even in Hamilton, there wasn't really like any tall guys. There was sure as shit wasn't any like 7-footers in
No, there's
Hamilton.
that
There was
that
that
one
one
guy,
guy from
STM.
Welland Notre Dame. Remember him? He
Oh,
was like 6'11", legit 7-footer in high school, but just lanky. Didn't know what to do.
I don't know. I might be thinking of someone else, but I think he ended up going to Brock, or at
Oh,
least
no
one.
doubt. I wouldn't be surprised. He was from Welland, Notre Dame. Like
Yeah.
that's in the area. He was
Hmm.
just like in high school too, right? When you're that tall, you just your body you're just not used to being that tall, especially if you
Oh
went through a
man,
growth
yeah,
spurt. Like remember Mike Allison?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
was like 6'2" in grade 9, and then
Man,
by grade 10 he was like 6'8".
I remember I came in grade 8. I came to I went to St. Mary's for like something, some basketball pickup, just that Jamie was running to kind of see,
Sure,
some of
like
the
feeder school
feeder
guys.
schools and some of the guys that are coming into his
Cool,
program.
cool.
And Mike was there, and I was like, "Who is this goof? Like he can't run. He
Oh
can't.
no,
He doesn't know how to use feet or hands,
yeah,
or like there's a disconnect there."
yep.
He was tripping, but it's because he was growing so fast.
Like he had
And
like stretch marks on his back. Like
oh
that's how
man, yeah.
fast he was growing.
His
Craziness.
hands are huge. Like
Right.
he was a big dude
Yep.
at a young age,
Yep.
and he developed. He got like way better.
Sure.
He was a great
Went to
player.
went to did he
Maine.
just go to Maine or did he go anywhere else?
I
Just
think he
Maine,
just
right?
went
He
to Maine. Yeah.
graduated from Maine and then it was all over. I know he was playing pro in England at one point
Yeah,
and
last time I talked to him, he was in Japan, I think,
unreal.
playing in Japan.
But
Hmm.
that's the thing again, like I didn't go through like a major growth spurt like that. So
Yeah.
my body, I've been used to it. Like and at that like again, at no point was I ever like unbelievably athletic or anything because that at a really early age, I definitely still developed as any other player does.
Hmm.
But I never felt that whole sense of not understanding like my body in space. Where
Hmm.
again, a lot of these players, like most crazy tall guys, hit some kind of growth spurt, right?
Yeah.
But I just
Yeah.
grew like super steady until like grade 10 and then stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's
But
high school is it's an interesting time
yeah.
for like athletics, right?
Hmm.
I came out of grade 8, and there was a guy um, that also went to St. Mary's, and he went to my grade school as well. He was the man. He was on the Ontario team. He was sick. Like
Right.
he was the really good player, and I was like, okay.
Right.
He played like senior in grade 9,
Wow.
then or no, maybe grade 10 he played senior. He went up like a year early.
Okay.
Anyways, like he played senior for a bunch of years, didn't grow, didn't develop. By the time I was in grade 11, he was in 12. I was like starting over him. And then
Wow.
by the time I was in grade 12, he was like 12 plus. He was like, yeah, they were like asking, his dad was asking my dad, like, oh, do you think he can play at university and stuff like that? Like, no, there's not really many schools talking to him. And I'm getting like letters from some schools. And like, it was just such a flip. And
Right.
it's a prime time where you can go like, oh, there's more people. I've never partied before. Like, let's go out, let's go do that. Or
Yeah.
like, or you don't develop or you don't grow, like whatever it is, there's all these factors, but
Sure.
it's so funny. Like, yeah, we go back and look at the hoopla, we look at all
Yeah.
those jokes websites where they're hyping people up, and we
Amazing.
talked about it last time
Right.
with Dave Boyce, and like
Yeah.
he was a great player in high school, but he
Yeah.
yeah, he had other, I think he was more interested in other things, you know.
Totally, clearly, and obviously he has his academics and stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, you're so right. There's all those different things that come up in high school, and even you know even the fact that like basically you have to go to university to like go to the next level in
Hmm.
Canada. Like it's not
Hmm.
in the States for that matter, really, right? It's not even just here, but like what if you don't want to go to university? Like for me, truly, if they had football in college, I probably would be like a carpenter of some type right now
Interesting.
because I
Yeah.
loved like construction in high school. I loved, wood shop class.
Yeah.
Um, so but that's the thing. It wasn't even on the map. Like there's just no football in college, so it was like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I get into university? And don't get me wrong, like I of course had my like academic interests as well. I did like it, but it took that much more effort because I knew I wouldn't be playing any sport if that was if I didn't get to the next level. And even with basketball, the good, like the quote unquote like good basketball is university level, right? So Not to say that there aren't excellent players at the college level. It's just you kind of are almost forced. And even for us, like with Hamilton, like the Catholic League being that much better than the public, it's almost like you're like forced into these different scenarios because you want to go to a better level.
Mm-hmm.
So you know it, but and don't get me wrong, it got me into university, got my degree because of sport, and I love it, and I love everything about
Yeah.
it, and I love the academics of it. But that's the thing. If you're not a kid that wants to go to or has the academic aptitude, you're just not going to make it. And
Yeah.
it's somewhat not fair because sports is just physical, right? Like, yeah, there's a
Mhm.
mental aspect of it, but you're
Yeah.
it's based
It's
on how good your physical being is. So who cares if you're smart or not? But
Yeah, and it's like
yeah,
human nature, right? Like you, when you're younger, it's so hard to think of the future, right? Like
right,
what's going to benefit me the most in the future? No, you're just a little kid running around, like doing what you want to do
sure,
and
sure.
avoiding things you don't like or that make you feel bad. And then
Hmm.
you're in high school, and this is exactly how I was. I'm like,
Yeah,
I guess there's a school component to going to university, but I'm just looking for like what basketball team I'm going to play on. Like I just want to keep
right,
playing basketball.
100%.
And that's mostly like I tried to factor in academics,
Sure.
and I think that's why I originally went to Western was like
Hmm.
the kind of tipping point uh, or tipping factor, I guess.
Sure.
But because they just had like a better business program
The
or more
Ivy and stuff.
recognized,
Right, right, right.
and the potential of Ivy, um, but that's I based it off of basketball.
Oh yeah,
Academics was just a small part of it,
sure.
and if I could look back, like what am I going to be doing more? Um, playing university basketball or the job that I get from the from the degree that I get for the rest of my life.
Totally. Yeah.
But that's again human nature of not having a hard time looking what's going to benefit me 10 years from now. It's going to
My
benefit me
gosh.
5 years from now.
For sure. For
So
sure.
hard.
And that's like even training, that's what that's all about. Training is you are like, you know, putting in like it's like if it's a bank, if your body is like a bank, right? You're like putting a down payment on later that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be in good shape
Mm-hmm.
by working hard. But if you don't put those payments down, aka if you don't work out,
Yeah.
you're not going to get to that. But it's such a future idea. Like again, not only training, but I remember when I was doing when I was a personal trainer, just telling people like it's not instant, and everyone's just expecting these instant results. That this is such a future thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I even personally, I don't get me wrong, there was other factors too, but one of the big reasons I didn't want to go down in the States is because they didn't have like kinesiology the way we
Mm-hmm.
have in Canada. So
Okay.
at least in my mind, I had a little bit of an idea that what am I going to do with my degree? But
Mm-hmm.
how many other athletes are out there that don't give a shit? They don't care
Mm-hmm.
what degree it is, let alone some of these D1 schools are bad for that, right? Where
Oh yeah.
like these kids, maybe they come out with like a general degree and maybe they went to some of their classes, because some of the schools are so bad, like they'll send people to take the classes for them, to do the projects for them. Like these
Yeah.
kids don't
Like
actually end up
tutors.
learning anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they break their leg their first year of their contract, and then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Right. So but again, it's so based on this false promise that like, hey, you might be able to make millions of dollars as a professional, even
Mm-hmm.
though like, and again, this is more NCAA, even
Yeah.
though there's less than 1% of the NCAA even makes it to the pros. It's
Yeah.
just like, and that's why they don't pay them. That's why the NCAA says we don't pay them, is because they have
Mm-hmm.
a chance. It's like, you guys are wild. 99% of them aren't doing it. Like they're just graduating and continuing on with their lives. Like,
Yeah.
so, or
Yeah.
getting hurt, or just doing whatever. Like, you know, if you got hurt, you lose your scholarship, all that stuff too, right? So I think in Canada we have the luxury of that's a little bit more in mind, like as far as you're going to have a life after sport.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because in Canada we kind of see sport like we can understand that sport isn't all good, like, which is an interesting conversation, right? Like there are some negative aspects to sport,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like for instance, like wrestling, or uh sports with
Anything.
weight classes.
Yeah. We
There's
have to
like
cut weight.
there's eating disorders associated with that, like gymnastic stuff. Like obviously speaking of gymnastics, there's all like the coach and player relationships. Like
Yeah.
that's a negative aspect of sport. But
Mhm.
it depends. Like Canada's better for it, but the States are horrible, man. They don't even really talk about this. So Kendra's sister is a sports psychologist now. She actually just did her dissertation, so she is a doctor in sports psychology.
Cool.
And she was working for Gymnastics Canada, and just dealing with all that crazy shit that's going on, right? And but she'd be going to conferences and stuff, and I might have mentioned this before, but some, like, depending on where the conference was, it kind of affected what the topics of conversation were. So like if there was a conference in Europe, there'd be topics of all conversation. Again, even some people doing their doctorate or their thesis on like whatever study they're doing it on a negative aspect of sport. So for instance, there's actually this one researcher that was doing her research on the negative aspects of coach and player relationships, right? So in Europe, she'd be doing her talk, and it'd be, she'd just present it, and then there'd be a few questions or whatever after about it here and there, whatever, and then it would go on and it would be discussed, and they'd continue on like any other conference, right? But if the conference was in the States, she would get like grilled.
Oh yeah.
She'd be like, this is perverse, like from this is from other American researchers, like what's going on here, like, what else is going on, why are you researching this stuff, like,
Mhm.
this is like very rare, like they just grill her really hard on it, because essentially in the States they don't see sport as bad, like they
Yeah.
see sport
They
as
just
all
get
good.
they get all defensive and like, I don't know, if someone that says something you don't agree with, like that doesn't mean you can't listen to it, you can't learn
Mhm.
from it, and you have to like lash out and be like, no, you're wrong, you
Right,
have no idea what you're talking about. This
right.
research garbage. Like, no,
And
like
they're
this
like,
is
it's
the research.
anecdotal, you don't have a good
Yeah.
population. This researcher, she actually married her coach.
Oh yeah.
Her husband was her coach.
Oh
So
man.
like
Yeah.
if anyone's going to know about this stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like and she's still married to the guy, right? So
Mhm.
it's not like it's
Yeah.
that is all bad either, right? To think anything is all good or anything is all bad isn't necessarily intelligent, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so many aspects to everything too, right? But that's exactly how that works, right? Is
Yeah.
that some of the aspects of sport aren't all peachy, you know
Hmm.
let
Yeah.
let alone like the stuff, like you're literally throwing your life away for some of this stuff, right?
Yeah. We, like you said, it's way better in Canada because like none of these guys are going straight to the pros from, like I can only really speak on basketball, but none of the guys are
Sure,
going to the pros. So
sure.
they're all getting their degree,
Yeah,
or, like 90% of them,
right,
which is, always a fallback and always a good thing.
right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. And again, like it's almost like in Canada too, we kind of have a little bit of the college program too, and we see a lot of guys like kind of go from university to college to continue their education too, like obviously in your case.
Oh yeah.
um right. But like again too, like it's not like it's the
Yeah.
end of, like, again, education is much more in the forefront,
Yeah.
I think in Canada, and it's on a lot of people's minds. But I think that, funny enough, that's one of the X factors between Canada and US as far as sports are concerned. Because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, you still have some Canadians that are going, listen, this isn't everything. There's
Yeah.
life after sport, blah, 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 blah. Where in the
Hmm.
States, they're like, this is everything. This is all that will ever be. As soon as
Yeah.
you're done playing, you're going to start coaching, and you're going to do this for the rest of your life. Maybe you'll get a gig coaching. Like, again, it's like
Yeah.
so much more. And then maybe you can be a sports psychologist, and maybe you can be a trainer, and maybe you can be a physical trainer, and maybe you can be a physical therapist. Like
Yeah.
they look at every aspect of sport as like, this is a lifelong thing that is very fulfilling and very good and all good. And that's the
Hmm.
problem with the States, is that it's not all good, let alone the fact that they have 10 times the amount of people to choose from. Like there's all these other factors
Yeah.
why the
And
States, and it
it's
depends on
so
the
much more
sport,
expensive. Like
because hockey is
that.
still fucking is still the best in Canada. But
Hmm.
if you look at, if I've said this before in the podcast, if you look at hockey, we treat hockey in Canada like the States treats every sport.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Crazy
But
grassroots, crazy funding. People are interested. Hockey towns, the whole
oh,
town will leave and watch. Like that's like football. That's like baseball. That's like everything in the States, right?
yeah, yeah. I'm so curious as how you can build that. Like, how do we
Mhm.
build such a hockey empire, and why can't we do it with another sport? Like, I would
Right.
love it to be basketball, but any other
Mhm.
sport. Like, and it makes me think it's a little sad to think of the CEBL,
Yeah.
uh, and how it like, oh man, I don't know how they were doing, but I loved the idea. I think they were doing it the right
Mhm.
way
Sure.
about starting this professional basketball league in Canada.
Mhm.
Uh, but now the COVID hit. Like, are they going to be able to sustain financially
Yeah.
keeping this league going? I know they have like I think a billionaire that's like sponsoring the entire league, but still, man,
Man, I was worried about the CFL, like the
yeah,
CFL, like let alone the CEBL. Like
yeah,
apparently
yeah, yeah.
they're becoming coming back next year, but still, it's like all these leagues. It's sad. Like again,
Those
all the
leagues are like already probably losing money, or
man,
already
CFL was
breaking.
dwindling at best. And then like, yeah, like you said, there's like I love the CBL. Obviously, Victor was doing his thing too. And like,
Hmm.
some of these guys were great, giving opportunities to a lot of players that, this is their dream to play professional
Yeah, and they
basketball.
were
And
able to partner up with CIS. What's it called now? U Sports.
U Sport, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, which is a crazy partnership. Like, you're
Mhm.
gonna each team has to have one player that plays in the U Sports League. Like, that's pretty cool. That's a
So cool.
wicked experience.
Yeah.
Might bring some more people. The fact that it was in the summer.
Right.
The amount of Canadians you needed on the team.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so all those things were like, yeah, if I'm gonna go play professional in Italy or Europe or wherever, and then I come home for the summer,
Yeah.
I'll play in this league, make some extra
Sure.
money,
Oh my
get
gosh.
get gym time, get
Stay in
coaching,
shape, 100%.
yeah, get games in,
Experience,
game
100%.
reps, like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, and
good idea.
I think you kind of you nailed it on the head there with the professional leagues. Like we've always had hockey professionally in Canada, like
Hmm.
since they started the NHL, right, with the original six, and let alone all the other teams. Like by far in Canada, we have most obviously hockey professional teams. At one point, we had freaking two baseball and basketball teams. At one point, now we only have one of each.
Hmm.
So you look at that Carter effect, and you're seeing a lot more professional Canadian basketball players now
Hmm.
because they said, "Hey, look, there's this team right here in Toronto. Maybe someday I could play for my home team." Like, could you
Yeah,
imagine? Where in the States they have that everywhere for every
yeah,
sport. So you can be a kid growing up almost anywhere in the United States and be like, "Man, look at these guys. It's right there." Like just the idea is so much more set in their head because it's
hmm,
all just like the opportunity is there. Where in Canada, you're like, man, we only have one team. Like
hmm,
that's pretty rare for me to even make that one team,
yeah.
let alone in hockey. You could be like, wow, we have how many Canadian hockey teams are there? Eight? Hey, do you know? I think eight because there's six and then a couple, or maybe nine because there's a few expansion teams like Winnipeg, Calgary, or is Calgary an original six? Because the original six is like uh Montreal, Toronto, uh, is Edmonton an OG? Or I know Boston, New York Rangers. Like and then there's another like there's like some of the original six were American,
Hmm.
but again, you have Vancouver and then you have Calgary and Edmonton, so two teams in Alberta, right? Then there's nothing in Saskatchewan though. But anyway, and then you have Winnipeg, then you have Toronto and friggin' Ottawa.
Yeah.
Um, right? Seven Canadian teams. Okay, yeah. So and then, but it's interesting because as you're starting to see us kind of try to get more professional teams, I think you'd start to see a little bit more of that again because it's all about like the grassroots essentially is our biggest difference between here and the States, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
again, my biggest thing is like look at football, look at like high school football
Hmm.
in the States versus Canada, right? Like
Yeah.
Canada is when you kind of start playing football is in high school. Like,
Yeah.
right? There's some opportunity to play as a young kid, but not nearly as much as in the States. They have this thing called Pop Warner, which literally you could be like 4 years old. Like just as we started when we were playing basketball, it was the same thing, but football. So like these little poor little kids are flying around, smashing each other. I
Yeah,
mean,
it makes
luckily
no
they're
sense.
also small and light, so that they're probably not doing as nearly as much damage to each other. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
don't know.
but that's the thing. That's
It's
why you get guys with CTE when they're 27, is because they've actually been playing football for like 20 some years
mm,
already, which
yeah,
is insane, man. Like, so
absolutely.
you kind of, but again, we look at the negatives a little bit more, where in the States, they're like, imagine you get to play for 20 years. Like, it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I think that's just kind of Canada is
Imagine getting a player
more.
in university. By the time he's in university, he's already played for like 15 years.
Yeah, and
Like,
that's
that was us with basketball, right?
yeah. It's usually like how certain people stand out, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, like Canada's just more conservative. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just kind of how we are.
Right.
Which
Right. Right.
and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It
It's
doesn't help us
conservative, and it's
sports, but
almost like there's like a realism in Canada too, right? Where it's like, winter's
mhm.
coming. We don't have
Yeah,
time for this shit.
yeah,
And maybe that, again, that's why hockey's a thing, because you can just play hockey all year round. Like,
mhm.
back in the day, obviously, thank God they started building gyms. But it's funny. I was talking to my buddy the other day about like pioneers. Like, could you imagine being a freaking pioneer in Canada? Like, OG, you're
Mhm.
showing up and you're just seeing trees,
Yeah.
and
You
you're
had
like,
to have landed. Yeah,
this is all yours, bro. Like, go ahead, but you just got to
yeah,
deal with the trees and the friggin', and then you're like, oh, cool. Like, summer, whatever, mosquitoes, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, it's like
yeah.
freezing cold. You're from like, Southern France, or like right? You came here and you're like, sacre bleu, right? But like,
Yeah, you
I,
don't know
I, I
what's
remember
going on.
going on a tour of like, have you ever done one of those whirlpool jet tours in Niagara on the Lake?
I don't think so.
So in Niagara on the Lake, they have these like boat tours, and it's basically this big flat bottom boat. It's got 4 250 horsepower cat diesel like engines on it. So it's crazy powerful, and it can go through the rapids of like Niagara, like the Niagara River. So
Mhm.
in the Niagara Gorge, which is like coming from from Niagara Falls, there's like these wild rapids, and they're like class. I can't remember what the highest class is when we're talking whitewater, but like, I don't know if you've ever been whitewater rafting.
Mhm.
You can only really go like, let's say like the highest one is class 5. You can only go into a class 5 like in one of those like little row dinghy inflatable boats, like, whitewater rafters,
Mhm.
before it's just too dangerous. It'll just tear your boat apart. It'll kill you. Like, you just don't go into it. But with this boat that I'm telling you about, the tour boat, you can go into like 2 classes above what you'd ever be able to go in. So let's say it's 10, like class 10 is the max. You can go into a class 12 with this
Oh
boat.
shit. Yeah,
So we're talking like the biggest rapids possible. Like, if you weren't in this boat, you
you
wouldn't
did.
go through. Like, you'd probably get sucked on. Like, it'd be bad
Yeah,
news.
yeah.
Anyway, so these things, and then they also kind of take you for this little tour of the Niagara Gorge. So not only are you ripping these rapids, which is so much fun, and like the way the boat goes, like it'll dip up and like go, like the nose will go underwater. So if you're
Oh,
like in the front couple rows, you literally get dummied by water. It's
yeah.
amazing. Anyway, but they take you on this little tour, and they literally take you through like where Nikola Tesla was like setting up all like the like hydroelectric dams.
Cool.
So all this stuff, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The work that would have been done, and this isn't even like nearly as big as some like the Hoover Dam, and there's other dam systems that are way bigger.
Mhm.
But you can even imagine, like, back in the early 1900s, I think all that stuff was going down, right?
Trying
Like,
to get that done would be
doing that,
crazy.
and like the same relative infrastructure is the same from back then. Like, Hamilton is powered by Niagara Falls because of what Nikola Tesla set up.
Yeah. I need to read more about Nikola Tesla. Like it
Bro,
sounds
he's
like he was
amazing.
just like way ahead of his time. Like he's just
Really interesting
it's
guy.
it's crazy all the things I hear about him.
Like, he was working on stuff that, like, at the time was kind of like blurring the line of like science and like spirituality almost. Like, he was looking at like what the Egyptians were doing, because he thinks essentially like the pyramids were like power generating plants. So,
Okay.
and
Okay.
there's some science to
I'm
back
with
this
it.
up, because so when, number one, when the pyramids were built, they were built at a time where the Niagara, or sorry, Niagara, the Giza Plateau was like lush. It wasn't like pure desert. So there
Okay.
was a river, like the Nile River, came right up to the edge of the Great Pyramids.
Okay.
So now it's been completely, like, it's much smaller. All that stuff is like kind of more or less desert, right? But you have to imagine when they built this, it was basically on the bank of a river, and underneath you have something called an aquifer. Do you know what an aquifer is? Did you ever do
Hmm.
Rocks for Jocks or anything like
Yeah.
that?
No, but
Like
I do know.
I did Rocks for Jocks at Western, like intro to geology and stuff. We were talking about stuff like that, and it was like all the athletes were in there. It was fun. But anyway, an aquifer is essentially like what you would drill in to get like water from a well. It's just
Hmm.
like underground water that's kind of trapped within rock. Essentially, and this is what Tesla figured out too. If you like build kind of a structure on top of that, that can kind of like focus some, like, because there's water in there, and because it's interacting with like the minerals in the rock, there's like there's like ion exchange and stuff, which is
Okay.
just how electricity is actually formed. That's how the electricity in our body is just, there's an action between sodium and calcium that changes, and that's how the electric impulses are generated in our body. So that's essentially happening in the ground. And don't get me wrong, I'm paraphrasing, I'm probably off with a lot of stuff, but
I couldn't tell you if you were
essentially
wrong anyway.
Tesla invented this thing called Wardenclyffe Tower, I think it was called, that could create wireless energy just from the earth. Like it would
I've
just,
heard this. Yeah.
and like from the I think the atmosphere interacting with the earth. Anyway, and he could. So there's actually a really cool movie called The Prestige. Have you ever seen that?
Hmm. Yeah.
Remember when he's talking to Tesla, played by David Bowie, and they take him to that field, and he's like holding a giant light bulb.
Okay.
Do you remember that scene?
Man, I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but
Tremendous movie. But anyway, in the movie, for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, it's about these two magicians, really good. It's Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, phenomenal.
yeah, awesome
Christopher
movie.
Nolan directs it. Tremendous movie.
Hmm.
Anyway, at one point, one of the characters is literally talking to Nikola Tesla. Like, he's a character in the movie, Nikola Tesla, and Tesla takes him to this like open field, like nothing around, completely open field, and he's holding a big like light bulb, like old timey light bulb, and he like puts it in the ground and it lights up. And it's because of this wireless energy, essentially, that Nikola Tesla was developing at the time in the movie.
And
Anyway, it would have been really interesting. It's funny. I heard on a podcast, like I heard a scientist actually talking about it. If that became the way to transmit energy and not using wires as we do today,
mhm,
we wouldn't have like computers as we do today. Like you wouldn't have like a circuit board, because that energy that's being transmitted through the air, like any piece of metal would pick that up, right? Like
okay,
if you think about it like that.
yeah, like from what I know, aren't there a bunch of like kind of conspiracy theories about Nikola Tesla and
Oh yeah.
like
Well, yeah.
um he maybe it was like the electrical industry was trying to like
Chris,
shut him
see if
down
you
because
can
he's trying to make this
find
stuff
any cool
free for everyone.
facts about Nikola Tesla. Sorry,
Like
go ahead.
he was trying to make this free for everyone, right? But like, isn't there a conspiracy theory that like the electrical industry was trying to shut him down
Well,
because?
him and Edison were going head to head, essentially.
Oh yeah, yeah, maybe
Right.
that's what it
So
was.
Edison was kind of like the electric industry, if you want to look at it like that. So Edison was DC, so direct current, and Tesla was alternating current.
Was okay.
So if you can imagine, if you imagine like electricity, like water in a hose, direct current is just like water being pushed through a hose, right? So to get it from one place to another, you have to have like enough energy to push all of that energy through that hose, and it from point A, and it has to travel all the way to point B for you to use it. So with Edison's idea, he would have had to have all these generating plants, like almost like every mile. like, because the direct current doesn't travel very far. It requires a lot of energy just to like push electrons that far across a wire. So what Nikola Tesla invented, he created alternating current, which basically, if you imagine the wire now, not necessarily hose, you imagine the wire and electrons as like as little balls that are spaced along that wire, stacked side by side along that wire.
Mm-hmm.
Alternating current, all it does is it pushes all those electrons that are lined up in that wire. It pushes them one electron one way and then brings it back the other. Do. So it literally, the only energy required is enough to just move one electron, which isn't a lot of energy. So you imagine,
but then doesn't that electron get used?
But it's being recharged. Like, yeah, it gets used, but because energy isn't like, now we're getting to like thermodynamics, energy doesn't actually like dissipate. It's only like transferred.
Okay.
Right. So
it's never, yeah.
Some of it, like if it's powering a light bulb, some of that energy will go off into heat and some of that energy will go off into light. But essentially the movement of that current, like AC, again, I'm starting to get outside my own wheelhouse here, but I just know that is how AC works. So it takes a lot less energy to just move like one electron back and forth. So it's almost like, when your plug, you have like you're creating like a loop, because it has two plugs, or you have like a positive and negative loop. So again, it's just like, it's there within that loop, it's just exchanging positive, negative. Anyway, again, we're starting to get into like electric physics stuff, but
in books,
because I'm not sure, like
you
bring up a good point. Like, I'm not sure if that just like, if the electron is kind of dissipated somehow, or it's somehow shared back. Anyway.
Yeah, because I'm wondering how it gets pushed back if it's being used, right? If it's going into a light bulb, then that light bulb's using one. How is it pushing back? But maybe there's something being released when it uses that energy.
Yeah, I think because there's like a positive and negative aspect to it. So I think when there's like a positive electron and then a negative electron, honestly, we're starting to get a little bit wild here. I'm not even really sure.
Yeah,
but I know, but it's the difference. Yeah, exactly. But that's the difference between alternating current and direct current, right? So it doesn't take as much energy to even just move the electricity. But Edison was all about like, AC is dangerous because AC uses like different amperage or different voltage or something, which is a lot more dangerous to people. Like DC current was a little bit less dangerous because I don't think it used as many amps. Again, we're starting to get into like physics that I don't really understand, but like Edison would put on these demonstrations, and he would like kill an elephant with alternating current.
Oh geez.
Right. So you just to show like, this is really dangerous and stuff, and blah blah blah. And it's like,
buy my product.
Right. So that was some of the stuff that Edison was doing. So they were kind of doing like stuff to fuck with Tesla a little bit, and like just undermine him, and Tesla was never really about making money with any of this stuff. A lot of the things he was trying just to like share with the whole world kind of thing. And that's what I mean about, it was kind of like this weird, like he was a very spiritual kind of guy. I don't know if he was like Orthodox. Like, I don't know if he actually like was religious, but again, I just know that he was starting to get into certain things that, again, potentially like ancient civilizations were trying to figure out too, like whatever that whole idea with the pyramids and stuff. And he was trying to figure out that was the connection that he was kind of making. And I think today we look at Tesla not only as a guy who kind of was shortchanged by his science, and like people didn't really give him his due, and he was treated poorly by Edison and all that stuff, but I think he was kind of a guy that was ahead of his time and was really getting into certain things that would have been interesting. Again, the wireless energy thing is very interesting, but it would be a different world today if we had that wireless energy. Like, we wouldn't have computers the way we know them. We would have figured something out. Like, humans would have come up with something else. But again, like it's one of those things where I think incorrectly Tesla is looked at like as this like demigod kind of figure of like fighting the man and like being like anti-authoritarian slash this is what happens when we suppress knowledge and stuff, right? Like because he died like alone in an apartment in New York City or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
like he had no money. Where
Yeah.
Edison is Edison and everyone looks at him like he's the man.
Yep. Teach about him in school. You tell the
right?
kids how awesome he is.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's the thing. And potentially, and the other thing that Edison, like not necessarily huge conspiracy wise, but Edison had like a lot of people that was working for him. So a lot of his discoveries were credited to him, but he didn't actually do it.
Right.
So, and
Sleazeball.
Westinghouse was another thing in that whole Tesla conspiracy stuff. Westinghouse was actually a company. I think they at least have a Canadian headquarters in Hamilton, but they were making a lot of the electronic, they made like electronic fans, and I think they manufactured some light bulbs, and they were manufacturing like appliances and stuff way back in the day. So they were extremely interested in all that new technology, right? All that, like, again, imagine this is a time where it's like electricity period is like the new technology.
This is the coolest thing ever. Yeah, I can see at night.
Right? It's almost like the internet, right? It's so big that it's hard to imagine that there was a moment in time where someone was like, have you ever heard of electricity? And you're like, no, what the hell is that?
You a quack?
Man, like even into like the 50s, they were still like really, really rural, like way out in the boonies. They didn't have fucking electricity. Maybe they had one light bulb.
Yeah, people probably talking like, "Oh, you're crazy, man! Like this is a gimmick. This is a joke. This is whatever." Yeah,
and even and then again, the converse today is that some people don't really have internet, and right, like the good internet anyway. Like I just saw that Canada, or at least Ontario, is starting to bring high speed to more rural areas, and it's like I didn't realize that people didn't have like. In Canada, in Ontario, I didn't realize people didn't have high-speed internet, but stuff you just take complete granted, right?
Yeah, my students, oh my goodness, they like can't imagine. First of all, they're only like 8 years old, but like they can't imagine a world without the internet. If it cuts out or goes out, they don't know what to do with themselves. Like it's wild, man. They like a bunch of them have like YouTube channels.
Oh my gosh,
it's so strange. Like it's just, I can't imagine what growing up in their generation is like. They all go home and play games together, and they're like talking their own language almost, like playing Roblox and stuff.
Remember, we would kind of have stuff like that where it'd be like, you're saying low battery? Is it done? Saying red? Okay. We're almost complete here with the new camera. It looks like the battery's kind of, we're just getting used to the whole new setup here. So the battery might die on us soon, but we'll just kind of finish off the idea here. Like it's only a few minutes kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, true say. Yeah, we're I don't know. What do you want to do? We can just keep going we're gonna keep going till the battery dies.
Sounds good to me, man. Okay. We could talk all day.
It'll probably be only a few more minutes anyway, but yeah, it's interesting with the kids too, right? Because like you look at when we were kids, like we had fads and stuff and like yo-yos or whatever and this and that and stuff. And there's Beyblades, there's all that, right?
But like think about how much more powerful the internet is. It's like like that's theirs. Like Beyblades doesn't compare to like a super addictive video game that's changing every week with new installments and upgrades. And
for sure.
Yeah. Beyblades can get boring.
Again, it was like what we talked about the last time we had you on too, is like, I feel like kids just, they see there's better things to do. There's more enjoyable things to do. And even though it's not necessarily more enjoyable, it's just the way those apps and games are designed is for ultimate enjoyment. Literally, you have scientists trying to figure out how can we make this as addictive, right? We had that website, addictinggames.com. Right? Literally the idea was to like, you
get them hooked
just in the name.
Yeah.
And I think parents, even some parents looked at that as like, hey, at least my kid's not out, you know, screwing around. They're not drinking. They're not doing crazy drugs. At least I know where they are, which is totally fair. But again, I think we look at technology. We're starting, I think, now to look at technology as, again, it's funny, bring it full circle. It's not a completely good thing, right? Like nothing is all good and nothing is all bad. And I think that we're starting to understand a little bit more of those darker aspects of technology too, right? Again, but this is also coming from us, where we had a life where we didn't have technology, and then like it was when we were kids.
We had both.
Now we have it, right? Whereas, like you said, some of your students are born into this world where it's completely, it's all technology, right?
Yeah, like we didn't have social media. Like there was a time when we were alive that there was no social media. They don't have that same experience. Like it was it always existed from when they were born, which is what's that
simpler times.
Like? Yeah.
Wow, man. Well, it looks like a nice day down in the Bahamas. What's the temp there today?
28 degrees, mostly sunny.
Oh, bro.
Swimming, got a little workout in. Yeah.
Nice. Playing any ball?
Lucky.
Did you play yesterday?
Not today. Yesterday, man. Last week, couldn't be stopped. Looked like Steph Curry. This week, couldn't get a bucket.
No.
Yeah.
Damn it.
It's the way she goes.
Yeah, that's it, brother.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think that's a good spot that seems like a natural spot to stop. And before our battery dies on us, I think that's perfect.
For sure, man. Yeah.
Nice, man. Great chatting with you, man. Anything, what's going on in your life? Anything you want to shout out to the people? Let them know.
Yeah. So maybe like Instagram, I'm going to try to start posting more.
Cool.
More active, maybe start doing some videos. I think I told you about that the other day. I got to do a video for school for Earth Day. So I might try to dabble in that a little bit more. So sweet. Angus 44.
Nice. We'll check it out. We'll post that on the underneath the video and everything, and check them out next time. We're gonna get into more D&D stuff, and get into that world, because like that's super cool, man. I think we'll be able to chat a lot longer about that. But for sure, with the new camera, we're just learning things today, and again, hopefully people start sending money to our Patreon, and we'll get an even better camera.
Yeah, send you cameras, send you money.
That's it, baby. Right on. Well, thanks for coming on, brother. Great to see you.
You too.
Enjoy the weather down there. Thanks everyone for watching. Remember, hit that like down there, hit the bell so you know when we drop these new videos, and check us out on the Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. We'll see you soon. Peace.